everyone had this collective awareness of the serial killer. The feeling that he could strike again anytime, any place, when right at that moment, everything goes dark. So imagine having a serial killer running around the most populated city in America, then you throw in a 25-hour blackout to terrorize people even further just for good measure. The 1977 New York City blackout is often referred to as the Night of Terror, and we were soon to find out why. We hear this car over our shoulder, and he comes around the corner and he begins pulling up behind us, which matched the description of the serial killer's car. The next murder would be minutes from where I lived.
There is an unwritten code in Brooklyn. You don't tell anyone else's stories, and you don't talk about anyone else's business. Every story I tell is mine. Locations, names, and specific details have all been changed to honor that code. This is Brooklyn Files, the real stories.
New York City is a global hub for pretty much everything, of finance, media, culture, business, fashion. So it's pretty common for a news story that starts as a local story to quickly escalate to a national or even international headline. And this was true throughout the 70s and 80s as well. You had the deaths of John Lennon and Andy Warhol, just to name a couple. Then there was the famous subway vigilante story. You had the Lufthansa heist. That was a huge story. And in July of 1977, there were two major national headlines that came out of New York City that happened to converge at the very same time. And one of those stories was the Son of Sam killings, and the other was the massive New York City blackout. So imagine having a serial killer running around the most populated city in America, then you throw in a 25-hour blackout to terrorize people even further just for good measure, and then that launches everything into chaos, which is what happened. So the Son of Sam story became national headlines because it was random and widespread and ongoing. Victims were turning up all across the city. In Queens, the Bronx, Brooklyn, the killer used a .44 caliber revolver to shoot his victims, and that earned him a second nickname, the .44 caliber killer. And you never knew where or when another victim would be taken. It was just so random. Some were injured, some were murdered, and to make things worse, as his killing spree escalated, and while the NYPD was struggling to identify this person, he began sending taunting letters to the police and to local newspapers. So this had the entire city in the grips of fear. It was July of 1977. I was around 8 years old. My mother was single and 38 years old herself, and she was dating at the time. And I remember always hearing my grandparents, kind of warning my mom to be extra careful. They'd say, like, be careful, Jeannie, always look around, be aware of your surroundings, and be vigilant of the serial killer. And not gonna lie, that really left an impression on me as a kid. I mean, why wouldn't it, right? My grandparents would watch me and my brother when my mother went out with friends or on any one of these dates, and they would wait up until she got home. Either my grandmother would be sitting up or my grandfather would be sitting in the chair when she walked in the door. There was this lingering fear hovering over the city like this threatening cloud, the feeling that he could strike again anytime, any place. And it had everybody in fear. By now, there were 5 victims, which was part of a killing spree that lasted almost a year to the day. So at this point, it had been going on almost 12 months already, and he wasn't finished, let me tell you. And the terrifying part is, the next murder would be minutes from where I lived, less than 7 miles from my doorstep. But of course, we had no way of knowing that yet. So we were living in this pretty decent neighborhood at the time. It was like your middle class, working class neighborhood, lots of families. And I honestly don't think there was a neighborhood in Brooklyn with more children. It was just crazy. So many kids, almost every single house on the block had like 2 or 3 kids. Dozens of us playing in the street, riding bikes, anything you could think of, like playing catch. We'd play this game called Scully with like chalk and melted crayons in a bottle cap. It was pretty cool. We'd play chase and hide and seek and wiffle ball and anything else you could think of. Hours and hours playing outside, not a care in the world. It was a different world back then. And don't forget, different time too, when an 8-year-old like myself could stay out past dark, play until like 9 or 10 at night. And one night, it was July 13th, 1977, had to be around 9:30 at night. Everyone had this collective awareness of the serial killer. And I remember this moment like it was literally yesterday. Me and a few friends were standing out in the street, we're leaning up against a car, and we're just talking and hanging out the way friends do. And we start to notice this street light that was right above us. It begins flickering, and it wasn't incredibly noticeable at first, kind of subtly flickering. And my friends and I, after a minute or so of this, we began to notice the flickering a little more. And then I think like after seeing this several more times, we began to shift our attention completely to the street light. And then a few more flickers, and now we start giving this street light like all of our attention. And it was right at that moment that we began doing like what kids do, which was like to dramatize it and exaggerate it, sort of give it some life. So one of us said something to the effect of like, imagine if all the lights went out, like, can you imagine? And we're like, ooh. And then we're saying things like, yeah, that would be so cool. And then another one of my friends is like, no, wait a minute. Like, that wouldn't be cool. What about the son of Sam, the serial killer? And then we were like, oh yeah, you're right, that would be scary. And I swear on everything, it was right at that moment that everything went black. It's July 13th, 1977. My friends and I hanging out under this street lamp, and it's around 9:30 at night. We're on our block. We notice the street lights, they start flickering, and then we start dramatizing it by saying, stupid things that kids say, like, how cool would it be to have a blackout? Like, it was exciting thinking about that. When right at that moment, everything goes dark. And all of a sudden, you could hear people reacting all up and down our street. Like kids that were outside hanging out, people sitting on their porches or their stairs on this hot July night, you could hear them now making sounds like you're hearing like, whoa, hey, what's going on? And they're reacting to what just happened. And I remember running to my house, which was just up the block. Like that was just my natural instinct to go home. And a couple of my friends along with me started following me. Come to find my mom had been watching TV when the power went out, and she's now by the front door, and she happened to be looking for us as we came walking up to our house. And one of the first things my mom says, I'll always remember this, she says, it looks like you kids better start eating all the ice pops we have in the freezer. So we thought that was great. Kids love ice pops. Who doesn't, right? So here we are, me and my friends, and we're tearing through this box of ice pops and just thinking it's all fun and games. Well, eventually my friends leave, and they wanted to check in on what was going on at their house. Back at my house, we start lighting candles and we start settling in for the evening. And it was right about then when my mom turns on the radio. We had this like battery operated transistor radio, which came in handy, and she kept it stored away. And we tuned into the news radio station. At this point, it's a little after like 10 p.m., maybe 10:30 or so. All the power in New York City is completely out. And that's when we start to realize, like, this is no joke. There's an entire pitch black city out there, and it's in utter chaos. The 1977 New York City blackout is often referred to as the Night of Terror, and we were soon to find out why. At around this time, reports start rolling in across the city about widespread looting, vandalism, shootings, everything. In the darkened street, people didn't hesitate to start smashing shop windows and steal everything from furniture and clothing to electronics and even cars in some cases. On top of all the looting and the rioting, there was this very alarming number of fires The FDNY responded to over 1,000 fires, including 14 multi-alarm fires. Let that sink in for a second. Led to the largest mass arrests in New York City's history. Close to 4,500 arrests made that night alone. Over 550 police officers were injured in that mayhem. Around 4,000 people had to be evacuated from the New York City subway system. This is while a serial killer is running loose the whole time, who still hasn't been as much as identified, much less caught. Talk about a night of terror. And that was just the first night. So the next day comes, the power's still out. We're trying to do all those things that you would do without the power in everyday life. And it was a little difficult, but we managed, obviously. And it was like the looting and burning and rioting was only just taking a break for the day because it was quickly going to resume again later that night. And it did. And like I said, in that day and time, a child my age could go outside in the evening and stay outside after dark, which we did a lot. So the evening comes, the power's still out. We're now approaching hour 24 or so of the blackout. It's around 9:30 at night. My friend and I had been out with our bikes and we were riding around the neighborhood. Now here's what you need to know. This is kind of important. It was at about roughly halfway through the Son of Sam killing spree that it had been reported that there was a 1970 yellow Ford Galaxy sedan that was seen leaving the scene of many of these crimes. And after the fact, it was actually determined that this was, in fact, the getaway car that he'd been using for each of these attacks. So my friend and I were sort of touring our neighborhood, wide-eyed about the whole thing, just kind of taking it all in, since this was all new to us. We'd never experienced a blackout, so this was so fascinating, And so we're a few blocks from home at this point, and we're probably about a block away from our school or so. By this time, we'd been walking with our bikes because we were kind of getting tired from riding around, when out of nowhere, we hear this car over our shoulder, and he comes around the corner and he begins pulling up behind us. The windows are down on this car, and inside you can kind of see the silhouette of this man, but you could barely see the driver's face from only the lighting in the car, but he was maybe, a guess of 26, 27 years old. And now we start to notice the car was a yellow Ford sedan, which matched the description of the serial killer's car. And the car is slowly rolling in the street next to us. It's kind of pacing with us, and we hear his voice coming from the car, and you hear somebody say, "Hey, you kids know where there's a gas station?" My immediate instinct was to stay clear of this car, but my friend, he then turns, heads towards the car window. I guess he wanted to be helpful. Before he could even answer this guy, my friend looks inside the car. He sees this shiny revolver sitting on the passenger seat. Seeing that, my friend suddenly goes into shock, and he just freezes up and he starts backing away slowly from the car. And as he's doing this, I start running with my bike, like something in me was just telling me to run. So I did. My friend gains his composure, starts following me. We're now both running in the street. My friend drops his bike out of fear or whatever, out of shock, and he just leaves his bike there. Suddenly we hear the car revving up. He starts following us. This large yellow Ford sedan is following me and my friend, so now we're almost at the corner as we're hightailing it. We're running in the street, me with my bike, my friend's left behind, his bike's somewhere back there, but we didn't care. We turned the corner, and I could see my school right there ahead of us. And all the while, I keep thinking, if this is the serial killer, this guy is playing for keeps. He's already killed numerous people, and I'm pretty sure he's not gonna suddenly get a change of heart tonight. This guy isn't gonna suddenly stop. But I also kept thinking that I didn't hear anything in the news about this guy going after kids in the past year, so that was sort of going on in the back of my mind. We eventually cross the street, we get to our school, and I remember thinking how they usually lock the schoolyard gate during the summer, so as we're approaching the schoolyard, I'm very worried that it wouldn't be open. And so luckily we get to the gate, it's partially open, like someone had put a padlock and chain on it, and there was like this 9 or 10 inch gap that we could sort of squeeze through ourselves. But I had to leave my bike there on the curb to get inside, but that didn't matter at that point. We just barely squeezed through this opening in the schoolyard gate, and my guess is that he realized that he wouldn't be able to reach us, so he just sat there for a minute. He's just staring at us, and we're staring at him. It's pitch black outside, no street lights, just the light coming from the moon above us and the light coming off the headlights of the car. And it gets really quiet for a second, and all you could hear is our heavy breathing and this car's exhaust. And we just stood there behind the gate looking at him, and he's looking at us. And we're all looking at each other for what felt like 10 minutes. And then he slowly drives away. But we waited for a few more minutes before we even thought about leaving. Then we started heading towards home as we started to feel it was a bit safer. And as we're walking back to our street, which was just a few blocks away, it's exactly 10:39 p.m. The lights start to flicker back on, and the power suddenly begins to return to the darkened city. Exactly 25 hours and 2 minutes after the complete and total blackout began in New York City, the power was starting to be restored again. And we soon arrived at home where all the power was back on, and it felt really good to have electricity again. And to be honest, I still don't have any real way of knowing whether that man was the infamous Son of Sam, and I'll probably never know the answer for sure, but I do know this, that it was only 17 days later, after that night, just a little over 2 weeks after our encounter, that his next victim would be shot and killed only 6.5 miles from that very spot. On July 31st, 1977, the Son of Sam shot 2 more of his victims while they were sitting in a car in a Lover's Lane area in Bath Beach, Brooklyn. One was injured, one died unfortunately, but that would end up being the end of his reign of terror. Early on the morning of August 10th, 1977, the .44 caliber killer, the Son of Sam, real name David Berkowitz, was finally caught and arrested by the NYPD. It was announced during a breaking news conference by the police. And I remember this part so vividly, laying in bed, and the sunlight is coming into my bedroom, and I could hear the TV on in the living room in the next room. My mom had it turned up kind of loud because of what was going on. And my mom, sensing that we were about to wake up, she was very eager to give us the news. And in this very excited and hopeful voice, my mom comes into the bedroom and all she could say was, good news, they caught the Son of Sam, they caught the Son of Sam. Did you hear me? They caught the Son of Sam. And you could feel this sinister cloud just begin to lift. And there was just this hopefulness that this shadow that had been cast over the summer of 1977 in New York City, it was finally gone. You could feel as if good overcame evil. It was just in the air. You could feel this collective sigh of relief sweeping across the 5 boroughs. And in the background, coming from the next room, I could hear the news conferences just buzzing with details of David Berkowitz's capture, all confirming that his reign of terror had at long last ended.